latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Before we get to matters geopolitical, starting with Syria, and Mike Scott would comment on this, I know, if he were in today. Dick Allen to the Hall of Fame. It's about time. About time Dick Allen was installed in the Hall of Fame, so congratulations on that. That was long overdue. Okay. On to matters of international import. So last week when we talked to Stephen Bucci, we talked about this play against Assad happening in Syria, and, you know, was it a real threat to Assad's reign of terror in that country? Well, then we found out over the weekend, yes, it was, because he abdicated to Moscow, and now the former head of al-Qaeda Syria is part of the power structure. I mean, he led the assaults that took Aleppo and Hama for the opposition. And also, this bears some examination of U.S. policy since Obama drew that red line in Syria that he chose not to defend. Rhetorical red lines. He was good at that. Some reminders here. From 2013 to 2017, the CIA spent about $1 billion trying to train and equip Syrian militias to depose Assad. Went nowhere. Al-Qaeda and ISIS cannibalized that Syrian opposition before Assad took it back through a brutal crackdown, which, of course, was a feature of his administration, imprisoning and murdering his countrymen, as dictators do. But so one is an assessment of U.S. policy over the last decade, and are we going to learn any lessons? Well, it doesn't sound like it from this current regime, but now the Biden position represents more than the Biden administration when it comes to the lifers at DOD and state and in the intel community writ large. So Biden's reaction to Assad's flight and whatever may come to fill the vacuum in Syria?
With a new constitution, a new government that serves all Syrians. And this process will be determined by the Syrian people themselves. And the United States will do whatever we can to support them, including through humanitarian relief to help restore Syria after more than a decade of war and generations of brutality by the Assad family.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the appetite is going to be for much in the way of U.S. funding of the situation in Syria and in whose hands you're exactly going to put that funding, particularly when, interesting juxtaposition yet again, last week it was Biden's focus on Ukraine to the exclusion of America. Now it's Biden's focus on Syria to the exclusion of America, because concurrent with Biden chiming in on Syria was J.D. Vance in North Carolina talking disaster relief and how the Biden administration is impeding, not just not helping, but actually impeding the provision of humanitarian aid to American citizens.
Well, I think, one, hopefully it doesn't take 45 days for this to happen, but as I mentioned earlier, Tom and Ted have explicitly asked the Biden administration to grant the FEMA waiver that would allow mobile homes to come back to this area, that would actually give people some short and maybe some medium-term housing. I mean, Tom and Ted are welcome to talk about that if they want to say more. I hope it doesn't take 45 days, but if, God forbid, it takes 45 days, that's something that is going to change immediately under President Trump's leadership. Think about it. The argument here is that you can't allow people to put mobile homes in a floodplain. in an area that has the risk of flood damage. Well, that's pretty much this entire area, an area of the state of Massachusetts. If you don't grant a waiver, you're effectively telling people they've got to move hundreds of miles away and do it 2 weeks before Christmas. It's ridiculous, it's atrocious, and we need a government that responds quickly to the needs of its citizens. So much of the frustration at FEMA, at everybody else, it's not malice. I don't believe that the officials of the Biden administration are intentionally doing bad things, but it's bureaucratic red tape, it's slowness, it's a bureaucracy that is moving at the speed of a glacier when what you need is people to respond to the concerns of the people of Western North Carolina.
Yeah, he just says it like it is, and I love him for it. I mean, what is the Biden administration doing to our own people? And don't forget, he also gave $1 billion to Africa last week, too.
There's one more angle to this before we get to Stephen Bucci. Those Syrians spread around the Western world that took flight and were given safe haven in Western Europe and America because of Assad's bloodthirsty reign. I mean, some legitimacy to that. Again, we want to be a country where people fleeing religious or political persecution can come temporarily, unless they, go through the process to legally be here permanently. So there was celebrations on the streets of Syrian residents, Syrian nationals, I should say, in other countries on the news that Assad had abdicated, understandably so. But this was an interesting exchange. This was in Ireland. And one Irish guy went up to those that were celebrating and asked them what was going on and then what this meant. Take a listen.
What's this all about?
So for the past few decades, we've been under constant oppression by Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria.
Yeah.
He's been imprisoning civilians. He's been murdering, torturing, massacring everybody left and right.
All right.
So since this morning, since 2 a.m., we've reclaimed Damascus being the capital of Syria.
Yes, yeah, I understand.
So the entire country is free now.
So you're free now?
We are free now.
So,
finally.
Finally. So now does that mean all you go back to Syria now?
The economic situation isn't correct.
Okay. So economic reasons. You're in Ireland, economic reasons.
We hope we can go back. We wish we can go back.
I'm sure you can go back now that you're free from
finally
occupation or whatever dictatorship. Like, there you go. Syria is free from the war. They can go back to Syria now. Let's see if they all go back.
Yeah, let's see. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined by Stephen Bucci, served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us, as always.
It's always my pleasure to be on the show. Thank you for having me back.
So, I guess let's start with what your assessment is of al-Jolani and company assuming control of Syria, what that means.
Well, I don't think anybody can say quite yet what it means. Remember, al-Jolani had been the leader of the al-Qaeda al-Nusra group, which was the al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria throughout this, from before the Arab Spring started through the Arab Spring till now. A while back, he allegedly withdrew from al-Qaeda, became independent, renamed his organization, and now says, he's repudiated al-Qaeda's desire to conquer the whole world for Allah. He just wants to conquer Syria for Allah.
But I mean, just to establish a little bit more of the record, $10 million bounty on his head by our State Department. I think that's still current, and a record of persecuting Christians and Shia and others who aren't in line with the orthodoxy. Can we trust that those days are behind him?
No, and that was the point I was going to make. We have no assurance whatsoever that he has really changed anything other than he made himself more Syria-centric so that he could do what's occurred this week finally, which was to get rid of Assad and to take over. So we have no assurance. We're happy Assad's gone. Assad was a bad guy. He needed to go, a horrific dictator. But this guy in particular and some of the other folks there are al-Qaeda or ISIS based. That means they are radical Islamists of the most vehement sort who think if you don't believe like them, you deserve to be killed, and they can kill you. They can capture you. They can use you as a sex slave if you're a woman, and by woman there I mean any female that's even vaguely close to being of age. In some cases, that's not the same definition that you and I have, believe me.
More like the definition P. Diddy has. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So this is not a time to be congratulating anybody, offering support, offering money, but seemingly the Biden administration thinks if you're any kind of Muslim and you get in power, they're going to throw money at you. Look, these guys are not friends of Iran, so that's a good thing, but that's because the Iranians are radical Shia, and these guys are radical Sunni, so they hate each other, but they really hate us, and they really hate Israel. It was telling that Israel felt compelled to take control of the buffer zone along the Golan Heights because they can't trust these guys to control it. They had a deal with the Syrian government, which was a deal with the devil, but these guys, Israel doesn't know how they're going to respond, so they've got to do the self-protection methods.
Well, speaking of tells, I mean, we launched airstrikes against what were putatively ISIS weapons caches and such.
Yeah, exactly. And ISIS is a big part of this coalition. Jolani's in charge of it. He's not ISIS, but he was al-Qaeda for many, many years. So this is not a time necessarily to celebrate other than the demise of the Assad regime, but let's not celebrate the rise of anything else because we don't know what that other thing is yet. And it's a high percentage chance that it's going to be bad rather than good.
Well, what should our role be in all of this?
I think we should, number one, make sure we protect the American forces that are there and hopefully continue to work with some of the people we felt were worthy of support, which is none of the leadership of this rebel group. There's some other fighters involved in it. None of them are in upper-level management, if you will. So we need to continue to support them, protect our own people, and dig into these guys to see what their intent is now, long before we make any promises to anybody to do anything other than what we were already doing with this one small section of the resistance. It's way too soon to declare victory and start handing out pallets full of money.
What about our great NATO ally, Turkey? Can they provide some adult supervision in the region?
Well, that's who has been providing the supervision. Whether it's adult or not is a matter of opinion. They have been supporting these groups because the Turks are, and particularly Erdogan, is a Muslim Brotherhood, which is a radical Sunni group that is supporting these folks, even though they were al-Qaeda and ISIS. They're kind of helping them and managing this because, truth be told, like the Iranians who think they should be in charge of the whole Middle East because they're Persians, the Turks think they should be in charge of the whole Middle East because they're the descendants of the Ottoman Empire. Look, right now, Erdogan is still part of NATO, but his focus is not on being a good NATO partner. It's being a caliph in the Middle East. His focus is totally on that. He is not a good partner right now to bring peace and stability in the Middle East. And I don't think the Syrians are going to be that thrilled if a bunch of Turkish troops start rolling in, because the last time they were there, they stayed for about 500 years.
Yeah, overstay their welcome. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a particularly encouraging situation. On the issue of NATO, just generally now, Trump sat down with Kristen Welker from Meet the Press over the weekend, and he had this to say about NATO and America's ongoing participation.
NATO's taken advantage of us because we were look, two things. Number one, they take advantage of us on trade, meaning the European nations, okay, like terrible. They don't take our cars, they don't take our food product, they don't take anything. It's a disgrace. And on top of that, we defend them. So it's a double whammy. So let me just tell you, I was able to get hundreds of billions of dollars put into NATO just by a tough attitude. I said to the countries, I'm not going to protect you unless you pay. And they started paying. And that amounted to more than $600 billion. That's a big thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be fighting. They wouldn't have any money to fight. If they're paying their bills, and if I think they're they're treating us fairly, the answer is absolutely, I'd stay with NATO.
Is that fair, Stephen?
Yeah, I think it is. We do accrue benefits from being a part of NATO, but it's not a free ride for European allies. They're all developed economies. They're not, destitute countries anymore like they were after World War II. They need to pay their fair share. That isn't saying they need to pay exactly the same amount we pay. They don't have as much. But percentage-wise, they ought to at least meet the minimums. And Trump talking tough, we've seen that bring results. That is not a bad thing. They're allies. We're supposed to work together as equals, which means sometimes saying, you do your part or I'm not going to do mine. And Trump has shown he can do that. He is letting us know that is the way he's going to operate again. And I think the allies are already making the calculations they need to make to fix what has been broken, or what was fixed under Trump and was broken under Biden, and now hopefully will get refixed.
I wanted to get to your reaction and assessment to what we started the conversation with, which was this Operation Timber Sycamore, the CIA op from 2013 to 2017, $1 billion, it's estimated, to try to train and train rebels, essentially, to topple the Assad regime. That failed, and then a bunch of guys with pickup trucks and Russian handhelds took out Assad. So what is the assessment of CIA? Is this another spectacular CIA failure, I guess is the question.
Look, I mean, I don't normally defend the CIA too ferociously because they have not done these things as well as I would like to see them do. But to be honest with you, they didn't have a lot to work with. As far as the people they were training, it was the weakest link in the anti-Assad coalition were the folks we were trying to work with because they were the only ones who weren't radical Islamists. So it was a tough lift. They squandered the money. It did not go anywhere near the way it was supposed to. And these other guys, they didn't do this just by grabbing a couple of trucks and ride in. One, Israel took Hezbollah off the playing board. That they were a big part of Assad's forces before. The Russians were heavily involved. The Iranians were heavily involved. All of those groups, because of their other activities, some fighting Israel with the Russia fighting in Ukraine, they all backed off. At the same time, Turkey piled on with the radical part of the resistance force. And that was those things, Assad's buddies leaving, Turkey coming in, that's what tipped the scales in the favor of the so-called rebels. But again, none of this is necessarily good yet. It might be, but we don't know. So we need to be a little bit circumspect about it. We don't need to be the first one out of the starting gate on this because we don't know which direction we're going yet. So let's be a little cautious. If it were me, I would say, Biden administration, stand down. You don't need to get involved in this. You're not very good at it anyway. And leave this for the administration that's coming in. who I think will have a little more positive direction and a little more ability to say no. They don't do things, or they're not going to do things just because everybody says this is what we should do. They do it because it's in U.S. interests, or they don't do it because it's not in U.S. interests.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yep. Thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. They're a bank with roots right here in Chicago, and their decisions are made locally too. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Hi, I'm Mick O'Rourke, President and CEO of Signature Bank. We'd like to wish you happy holidays from our Signature Bank family to your family.
Signature Bank helps local businesses succeed. Let Signature Bank turn your business vision into reality this holiday season. Visit signaturebank.bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
And this is Brian Duncan, co-founder of Signature Bank. We wish you the very best this holiday season from Signature Bank, Chicago's business bank.
Signature Bank helps local businesses succeed. Let Signature Bank turn your business vision into reality this holiday season. Visit signaturebank.bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Amy Jacobson and Dan Proft here, and we want to tell you about our 2024 Food for the Poor campaign.
If you've listened to the station and to our show for any length of time, then you already know about Food for the Poor. They are a nonprofit, faith-based organization that provides food, water, medicine, clothing, and life-saving supplies directly to local partners in Latin America and the Caribbean.
We all know how bad the situation is right now in Latin America and the Caribbean.
For many families, the cost of food has simply become prohibitive, leading to sickness and starvation.
The only thing standing between these families and starvation is Food for the Poor. But in order to get this food to those who need it most, Food for the Poor needs your help. Your one-time gift of just $50 can provide life-saving food for a child for an entire year and provide their community with access to water.
To give a gift of any amount, just call 844-862-4673. That's 844-862-4673.
Or you can visit 560theanswer.com.